Hello and welcome to Simple Life Philosophy. I'm your host Ed Raby. This is the channel where we endeavor to find a philosophy of life and living life that is simple, both in its ability to be understood and for its ability to be executed. Today I'm going to continue on my series as I continue to look at the book How to Be a Stoic of Massimo Pigliucci. I believe that's how you say it. I'm still butchering that. But the idea I'm doing right now is I'm going through chapter by chapter. In this particular case, chapter 2 is called The Roadmap for Our Journey, and where Massimo is kind of like discussing some of the history of Stoicism, why he is using Epictetus as more of his roadmap than, say, Marcus Aurelius or Seneca, although those two guys do show up in this book. He's basically also trying to lay down from the history of Stoicism what the philosophical framework of Stoicism became. And this is where I think he really every philosophy, in my opinion, has this foundational level and understanding of the way we're going to proceed. And I think in this case, the roadmap for our journey, he is really trying to lay out that roadmap. And I really appreciated this chapter for that, because a lot of times when I read introductory chapters of books, I'm usually pretty disappointed in the content, because a lot of times it's, some sort of, this is why we need to read this. Well, I don't need to know that. I picked up the book because I want to read it. I don't need to know why I want to read it. Now, chapter 1 was great because it told me about the history of the author with Stoicism. And this time, he's kind of delving into the framework of Stoicism and how it achieved that framework through its history. And so it has this backdrop of everything that you study is all part of this framework and all part of this kind of idea of how to approach the world. Okay, so Stoicism starts with the simple idea: how do we live the good life? Okay, and the good life, the thing about that statement, the good life, that to me, when I read Stoics, it's like there's a little bit of you're allowed to define what that is for yourself. Okay, and now they may be speaking in broader terms where we live in peace, where we have some prosperity. How do we live the good life becomes the basic idea. And what Stoics basically do is they say, hey, listen, this is how we're going to live the good life. This is how we're going to understand the world that we live in and understand how to engage it. And they first start off with this: if we're going to live the good life, we need to understand and accept the world as it is. And that includes who we are and our place in it. Okay, I think a lot of philosophies try to push you to, you need to transcend the world or transcend who you are and become something different or change the way you do things or whatever. I don't think Stoicism really starts that way. If I'm reading this correctly, and maybe somebody can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but they're saying, listen, you need to accept the nature of the world, your nature, and your place in the world as part of that nature. This is not a transcendent philosophy where you're trying to transcend the realities of what it. I think Epicureanism gets a bad rap because it's basically the idea is you need to avoid suffering. I think, though, that's a little bit of a transcendent philosophy because it seems that the goal there is somewhat impossible to achieve, to avoid, suffering as much as possible. I suppose you could have as much as possible, and that helps. But Stoics come, listen, in order to understand the world and be happy in this world, we have to understand what is. And we need to stop, trying to make the world into something it's not, trying to make ourselves into something we're not, but instead accept those things and then try to grow our character, try to grow our virtue out of an understanding of the world around us and ourselves. And so I think that's actually a better place to start. I've always been one of the philosophies that my job is not to be the best ever. My job is to simply be better than I was yesterday. And by self-improvement every single day, I begin to grow and develop into a better person. The people around me may see that and follow my example, or they may not. It doesn't really matter. I know I can't control that, which is the next chapter. We'll talk more about that. But my main issue here today is I really like this idea, this highlight. What I'm trying to highlight is this idea of, hey, accept the world as for what it is. Accept its nature. Quit trying to transcend the nature of the world. Accept the nature of the world. Accept your nature and your place in the world and move from there. Don't try to, I'm completely dissatisfied with where I am. I'm going to make this cosmic leap into something that I'm not, or try to overcome the world, what the world is, by some sort of fanciful notion. I just don't see that. The other thing that the Stoic philosophers, of course, were into is everybody in philosophical schools was using reason. And what they're saying is you also have to understand reason, because what human beings are is, to the Stoics, is a being that can actually rationally engage the world and rationally make decisions about what they're going to do in it. Okay, so you understand the nature of the world. Now, how are you going to engage it? Well, we're going to take reason and rationality, engage it, and we're going to also understand the limitations of reason, that reason has its limits, and it's not a be end end all. Okay, so this whole idea of accepting the world as it is, accepting our place in it, accepting who we are, accepting what it is instead of trying to make it into something it's not, and then using reason and understanding the limits of reason and how reason can fail to kind of continue to engage the world and try to find that path to the good life. And I think I'm understanding this correctly. So if anybody knows more about this and has a better understanding of it, I'd gladly, receive any tweaks or comments or anything along that line. But I really like this chapter because I think he laid out this framework really well. And he also concluded it with kind of the same analogy that the Stoics often use, which is the analogy of the garden. The good life, the fruit, the thing that we're trying to eat and fruit and enjoy, that is our ethics. That is the character, the virtue that we're trying to develop. Okay, so the soil and the environment becomes the nature of the world. Okay, we're growing these plants in this environment. We need to understand the environment. We need to understand the nature of the world. We need to understand the nature of ourselves and the character we're trying to develop. We need to have an understanding, like a good gardener would have, of what we're trying to grow, what kind of soil we're going to need for that, what is the nature of the world, what can we change, and what is beyond our control. Okay, so that understanding of the natural world becomes more like the soil in the garden itself, where we're trying to grow the fruit and we're trying to develop the fruit. And then they end the analogy with, well, where does logic fit in? Well, logic is the process of weeding out bad stuff and putting a fence around your garden to protect it from predators. Okay, so logic becomes, and reason become the tool of protection against things that would steal away our virtue by being weeds, vices perhaps, and then also putting up the fence around the garden so that animals can't take what is ours. So there really is this dual understanding in Stoicism of understanding the world and understanding reason, and using those things to develop a philosophy of life that leads us to the good life, okay, or leads us, in the case of the analogy of the garden, to the fruit, character, and virtue in our lives. And I have to say that this was a really good chapter for somebody like myself who is just getting introduced to Stoicism. I really like the fact that he laid the foundational understanding and a little bit of the history of Stoicism, because it kind of allows you to, okay, this has been around for a long time, this is how it got started, this is the basic framework of it. Okay, well, now that we have the basic framework of it, what are we going to do? And that's where he goes into his, there's the rest of the book is in 3 parts, and each part of that is kind of, working on our understanding of how things work. And so I just found it very, very interesting that he starts here. And that's kind of the way he's going to develop things. He's going to look at this three-part nature of our pursuit of the good life and how we're going to get it. And so I just found it very interesting. As always, I'm not trying to spoil the book for you. There's a lot of other things in there, including a very key element in the chapter that I'm going to leave for you to read. This was just the thing that stood out to me that I thought was very, very well done. I definitely encourage people already. I haven't even got to my final review of the book, which I'll do on the last video of this series. But when I do that, I'm already going to say I recommend you go get it, read it, and it will help your understanding of Stoicism and how it works in a more practical way. Well, once again, thank you for stopping by. I appreciate every single one of you. Make sure you like the video, share it, comment if you have some comments. There's a lot of things to comment on this one because I've asked a few questions. And also make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell so you can get more content as it is released. And this has been Simple Life Philosophy. I've been your host, Ed Raby. And, I just want to thank all of you once again, and you have a great day, and I'll see you again soon.